Greetings, travelers. I'm Kaiserkrat, and this is my kingdom. Long united, the empire must divide. Long divided, the empire must unite. Such is the cyclical nature of Chinese history. China, as a civilization, has a history that stretches back at least 4,000 years, and it was at the height of the classical age, an age of massive change and overall urban and intellectual development that was overtaking the world, where China as a unified imperial state began. Beginning with the sack of Fenghao, capital of the Zhou dynasty, by roaming barbarians in 771 BC, China entered a period of decentralization in which local lords set up control of their own lands, largely independent of the rule of the overarching Zhou dynasty. During this period of central dynastic weakness, known as the Spring and Autumn period, many new states and feudatories arose and competed with each other. The Spring and Autumn period is known as a period of constant warfare and unimaginable bloodshed, but also, interestingly, an intellectual flowering of ideas known as the 100 Schools of Thought. Some of China's most well-known philosophers came from these centuries of chaos, including Confucius, who gives the namesake for this period from his historical accounts known as the Spring and Autumn Annals, which told of the history of his home state of Lu, one of the many states to form after the weakening of the Zhou dynasty. Other philosophers include Lao Tzu, founder of the school of Taoism, Mo Tzu, founder of the school of Moism, and perhaps most famously, Sun Tzu, author of The Art of War, a book about how to be successful in warfare. The constant warfare between rival fiefdoms created a survival of the fittest situation that drove innovation in the form of better, more effective armies, more effective administration of state and bureaucracy, periods of hegemony where one state would dominate its neighbors until it was knocked down and replaced by another dominant hegemon, similar to classical Greece, which was almost contemporaneous, except on a much larger scale. By the 5th century BC, the hundreds of small states and fiefdoms that had formed in the wake of the Zhou dynasty weakness had coalesced into just a handful. This is the beginning of the Warring States period, as these states continued to fight for dominance and see the development of truly effective armies. By this point, the traditional chariot-based warfare had been replaced by huge armies of massive amounts of infantry, conscripted through an effective bureaucratic system from the local peasant populations. Improvements in army organization and tactics and siege warfare led to ever-escalating levels of violence in ancient China. Eventually, by the 3rd century BC, one of these states, the state of Qin, the furthest to the west and considered barbarians by the others, had developed the most effective army and began winning war after war against its closest rivals, expanding its territory. In 247 BC, a new king took the throne of Qin, named Yingzheng. After surviving a series of assassination attempts, he would go on to launch a new series of ambitious wars in the coming years. Starting in 230 BC, using his massive armies of over 100,000 men organized into an effective regiment system similar to modern armies today, Yingzheng conquered the state of Han. Chinese warfare by this point included soldiers wearing lamellar armor made up of metal scales laced together in rows, the use of long spears and halberds which warded off enemy cavalry charges, swords and shields for close-in combat, and especially the use of the crossbow. Organized crossbow teams using standardized, interchangeable parts, in case one breaks, are what helped make the Qin army so effective. A state-organized supply of soldiers and logistics for them are what really made the Qin such a dominant force. After conquering Han, Zhao was taken in 228 BC, followed by Wei in 225 BC, Chu in 223, Yan in 222, and finally Qi in 221 BC. What made the conquest so rapid was in part due to a divide-and-conquer strategy. Qin would play the states off each other so they would be focused on their own rivals and not form a coalition against the far greater threat that was the Qin itself. After uniting China for the first time in its history into a single centralized state, Yingzheng took the name Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. After he created a totalitarian regime that would make Mao blush and brutally crushed any opposition, leading to the deaths of thousands, and even burned books detailing the history of China before its unification under Qin, Qin Shi Huang, however, did institute many reforms, standardizing units of weight and measure, building an interconnected road system, expanded China's borders against barbarians to the north and south, and began construction of the Great Wall to keep nomadic tribes from the north from raiding China. In his waning years, Qin Shi Huang seemed to grow more and more insane and unpredictable, ultimately leading to a quest for immortality. Ultimately, he died in 210 BC, being buried in an enormous underground tomb with his army of terracotta soldiers watching over him in the afterlife. Following his death, his favored son was surpassed by his advisors in favor of a weaker son that was more easily controlled. However, the numerous suppressed peoples under the rule of Qin Shi Huang rose up in rebellion, and China entered another period of disunity. Thank you for listening, and until we meet again, safe travels.